Hello, Marie. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Let's just clear one thing up. Although your surname's Jenkins, we're not actually related, are we? As far as we know.
Not as far as we know, although mine's through marriage.
Ah, is it? Whereabouts does your husband come from in Wales? Does he know?
Well, I don't know. I always think he says that Jenkins originated in Cornwall.
Well, we get around. We're the lost tribe. All right. So today we're talking about culture and the part you play in that. Why don't you give us a little bit
Uh,
about your background and why you can talk to us about culture today?
Perfect. So, to take you back, I worked in housing for a number of years. I was a head of service of community support and care. Really passionate about the sector and still am today. But unfortunately, in 2013, 2014, I left the sector due to having poor mental health. And although that was quite a negative time in my life, I've been able to turn that around and make it into a positive. So I've now got a business called Advance Your Wellbeing, which is providing online training to the housing sector, uh, specifically around culture and how emotional intelligence can help improve cultures within organisations. And I think it's a real pivotal time in terms of prioritising staff wellbeing for a number of reasons, which we'll discuss through the course of this podcast.
Okay. So emotional, measurable intelligence for someone who doesn't understand that, and let's for a minute imagine my surprise. I don't. Could you give me a bit more about that? What is that?
Okay, so emotional intelligence is about self awareness and relationship management. And it looks at you, it's about raising your awareness of your own emotions, so your self perception. It's looking at your interpersonal skills, so the relationship building side of things, your decision making, how you manage your stress, all of those things. So if you are more emotionally intelligent, you're more likely to be able to thrive in any given situation. And thankfully, this is one area that we can all improve on. And like I've said, in housing at the moment, there's so many demands in that area. You know, the threat, we've said threats and opportunities culture in housing, and there are so many threats, but with having emotionally intelligent teams, you can overcome those and see them as opportunities. Does that help?
So if I was a frontline customer service staff, for example, and I'm constantly hearing the same complaints, I've got damp and mold, I've got windows that are broken, that's going to wear down my emotions and make me more fraught and the job more stressful. And can you come in and give me some coping mechanisms to support me through that?
Yeah. So, in terms of coping mechanisms, it is about being more aware of what are the stress points, what are the things, what are the triggers that can make you sort of spiral with your emotions. So, I always do an exercise where we look at putting down a list of different emotions and are they helpful or are they hindering you? So once we put those down, once you've got an idea of the ones that do hinder you, then you can turn them around and make them into positives. So, for example, say if you get frustrated, say, you've got all these calls coming through to your call center and you just one after another and you're completely frustrated. Then in that situation, you have to look at how can you turn that round so that you can be more open to listening to your customers. So, perfect example, you're on the phone, rather than worrying about what's coming up next, you just clearly focus on the customer you've got in front of you. because you can't alter how other people react. You can only alter your own behavior. And I think that is a really important point, really, is that it's about how you respond, not necessarily how they respond.
Okay, so there's a nice little one, and that would go for an inbox full of emails, wouldn't it? Just focus on getting the one done. My head used to dart around until I went, no, we deal with this one, then we move on to the next one, and deal with them in that way. And so,
Absolutely.
so we've got the frontline staff. There's that focusing on the front call, on that first call that's in front of them. When that comes to sort of mid-level management and they're managing KPIs and they have a certain amount of calls that they have to process during a day, how does that culture transfer to their needs? So the needs of the customer service agent needing to focus on that one call and get that done, opposed to the sort of needs of the manager who needs that call done and dusted and out.
Yeah, that's a really great question because I feel I'm accredited to be able to answer it because I was that manager.
Mm.
So I clearly was not managing that particularly very well, hence why I burnt out basically. And so for me, I think if anything, the middle management structures within housing associations are the ones that need the training the most.
Yeah.
So that is about the relationship management side of things, in terms of sort of looking at how they support their teams whilst also looking after their own and practicing their own self-care. And the big thing there is about communication, and delegating more. Quite often you find middle managers are the ones that take everything on board, but actually through being more assertive and delegating better, that can help them. And so again, emotional intelligence is a key part of that. So,
Yeah.
when it comes to decision making, it doesn't have to always be the manager. And I think it's really empowering actually to sort of delegate that on to the other frontline staff because it's about progression for them as well. So I think that's a win-win situation.
I used to train people although they were internal departments, if I was passing on a call to you, in theory, I'm your customer and I have a response time, an expected response time for you to deal with me. It's taking that pressure off. So we've got the mid managers, they need their measured intelligence to support their frontline staff. And how does it, if we're all got our measured intelligence and we've all got these coping skills, how does that positively affect the end user, which is the resident?
Great question. I think it's about, yes, all organisations have their policies and procedures, but it's about your connection with them, connection with your residents, and active listening. I
Mm.
think that's another thing. It's quite often what we do is we listen to respond rather than actually understanding it from the customer's perspective, or in this case, a resident or a community member's perspective. So it's about being a bit more customer centric in your response rather than sort of just giving your stock answer.
Yeah.
Um, Ultimately, staff are working in this sector because they do have that social, um, aspect in terms of their passion for supporting their communities and wanting to create community cohesion. Um, so, what I would say is actually by active listening to your customer, then you're more likely to be empathetic, to understand things from their perspective. Um, and then that's going to have a knock-on effect within the communities in which they live, or you'd like to hope so.
Does that have, so again, if I'm a customer service guy and I'm dealing with in an empathetic way and I'm taking on the problems, I understand the situation better because I've used my active listening and I'm emotionally involved. I'm aware of the threat, be it through antisocial behavior, threat to health through dampness, cold, yiddle or yaddle. what effect does that have, must have on me if I'm taking on all of that? And then the next call is someone who's got a child with breathing difficulties because of damp. And then how do I cope with that?
Well, that's a great point actually. So if you were to look at the CIPD report on workplace well-being, employee sickness absence is the highest level it's ever been reported in the last decade, with mental health being one of those main factors. That's why, and that is because of the heavy workload,
Mm,
um, and also management styles. So that automatically shows to me that an emotionally intelligent team could fare far better. Um, and so maybe I'm also thinking of the tenants and the residents. Maybe they could also benefit. I mean, we did a lot of projects when I worked in housing with our communities. We went out and we did volunteer days and things like that. And we did sort of neighbourhood plans which involved residents within them. But maybe we could do more to sort of equip residents, manage their expectations better. I think that's a huge area
yeah.
in terms of what we can and can't do. But maybe there's some elements if we can train emotionally intelligent teams within organisations, we can also train emotionally intelligent communities. Now, there's a thing.
There's a thing that is. I like the idea of making the resident, because I don't think we're customers yet. I believe we're residents, of making them aware of some of the problems, some of the hurdles, some of the time delays, so that their expectations are already laid out at the beginning. And I think there's too much of a, we just don't talk about our failures. Although I'm seeing some change in that, so that's a sort of very wide spreading comment, but I am seeing some focus change in some areas. But I think with housing being under so much pressure, there needs to be some more honesty. We need to say, look, we can't get round to you. We can't do this until week 6 or whenever it may be, so we can manage those expectations. And I think that engagement, then, when it's an honest two-way, don't have the funding for this until next month, whatever the reason may be, we don't have the team ready until next month, it's going to be next month. Okay, I think there would be a surprise from the housing associations if their residents would go, well, okay, I'm not happy about that, but if that's when it is, then so be it. But we don't quite get that treatment, that end treatment. We just get, all right, I forwarded it on to the right department. And then, of course, the customer service burnout comes from me calling back the following day. Oh, I did forward it on to the correct department. I did forward it on, and that's when that burnout comes. So where is, because we've got a lot of housing associations who make great claims about their culture and embedding their customers, the customers in the heart of their everything they do. Where do you think the weak chain is in that profile?
Oh, um, I think it's ultimately about equip, equipping the staff, frontline staff, initially to manage customers' expectations. It has to be. Um, I mean, I was reading the House Smart Customer Standards, and it was saying in there was 1 in 3 of residents are satisfied with the handling of complaints. 1 in 3.
Hmm.
Um, so that clearly shows there's an area for improvement. Um, the sector needs to improve in how they manage residents, as you've said. Um, shared ownership is another area that could be massively. The staff need to be trained in order to give customer excellence. The staff need the training. It always comes back to staff training. So, in terms of shared ownership, that's a massive area that is it's relatively new, actually, phenomenon in the housing area. So, have the staff got the skills? I mean, there's a great article from the Housing Ombudsman on shared ownership complaints and improving the fairness. I think, and I'll send you all these links as well, Ben,
Yes,
because
please.
there's a lot of stuff in there. in terms of how we can improve things for residents. And ultimately, we want residents to feel like they are customers. That's what
Yeah,
the
I
sector
do.
wants.
Yeah, I think that's a difficult one, and we're a long way off that. And the makeup has definitely changed with shared ownership, and I think this is part of the problem. I wrote a piece a while back, the missionary position and the Messiah complex, or the Messiah complex and the missionary position, which was this old
Great point.
mindset that the residents should be grateful. We've given them affordable housing; they should be grateful, and we've done that in a sort of messianic way. Aren't we great? We're providing this. Well, actually, when shared ownership came along, the makeup of the customer, the makeup of the resident changed. You have a duty to look after your share of the building. I have a duty to look after mine. And I don't think the mindset's changed. And this is where my concerns around the culture embedding is. I think we've got those old mindsets that have come through the rank and file, all the way up to sort of senior leaders, and they're still operating on the same mindset of, we provide you affordable housing, you should be grateful. How can we overcome that, do you think, Marie?
Well, you've actually hit the nail on the head there in terms of Ben. It starts at the top.
Mm,
It starts at the top. Um, how many housing associations have really great leaders? And I'm going to put myself out on a limb there and say that Yorkshire Housing, so Nick Aitken there, in my view, he is a fantastic CEO leader. And I know there are many, many more, but I think a lot of them have got management skills that this is how we used to do it.
mm,
And that's fine, but they can also improve in their leadership skills because ultimately a hierarchy in an organization should be a golden thread that goes from the front lines team all the way up to the executive team and back down. It should be a fluid um, communication rather than a top down approach, in my view.
mm,
I was fortunate. I worked in a housing association that was very sort of empowering to their team. Um, and partly I take that because it's like a double-edged sword, really, because I didn't take responsibility for my own health and well-being at the time, and hence why I took burnout. So there was the positive side of being delegated to, but also I should have been more assertive in terms of being able to sort of say, right, this isn't my area of expertise, I need to pass it on, etc., etc. But for me, I definitely believe it's about teaching leadership skills at the top
yeah.
and having emotionally intelligent leaders. I mean, there's a couple of really great thought leaders in terms of emotional intelligence. One being Daniel Goleman, and the other being Dr. Reuben Baran. They're both two big thought leaders in the area. But the thing that changed it and helped me develop my business, financial well-being, was from reading a book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and that's available now by Jean Greaves and Travis Bradbury. And it was like a light bulb moment when I reflected on why I burnt out when I was in the sector. It was like I had all those light bulb moments going, okay. So what I would say is have a read of that book. It's fantastic.
All right. Perhaps I will. I'm a Myers Briggs MBTI practitioner, so I can go in and do the MBTI. And I always find that we've got so many different personalities within one team. And I had a light bulb moment where me and this guy, we got on famously. Yet when we got into meetings, we just talk. Yeah, brilliant. And off we went without actually without getting down to the granular detail. So it was balancing those teams out. So, we made sure if we were in a meeting together, there was a third or fourth person who could sort of sit there who wasn't so loud and could take down the notes and get on with that. Is that part of your sort of practice to come in and say, we need to create teams that dynamically work together and support each other's strengths and weaknesses?
Uh, that's a great point. It isn't my area of expertise. I do work and collaborate with a number of people that do facilitate in that area specifically. Mine is more sort of looking at e-learning training for organisations, and being innovative as well, such as like gamification. Have you heard of that term?
No. So that gamification, I'm not
So
sure I heard it correctly.
gamification is
Sorry.
you absolutely did. It's basically using games as a way of learning. So I think we've got a lot cleverer and smarter in terms of our training offer. So that is more sort of using innovation, virtual reality, for example. That's another area. So mine is more on that training side rather than on the mediating and
Right.
that side. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got what do you think is the big hurdle for you to embed an emotionally intelligent team in today's housing associations? What's the biggest hurdle that you face, Marie, when you go into any company within the housing sector?
I would say silo mentality. Ooh, how about
Yeah, let's have a bit of silo mentality.
that? So that's what I need to turn around. It's about being more open. It's about being more respectful of other people's views. It's about building trust. And ultimately being open to fail. Now, that sounds a bit of a cliche, but that is when we fail at something, that is when we learn our most important lessons.
Yeah.
So I think if you find a space in which it's okay, as long as we learn from something, then that's a good thing. So there's a number of things there, Ben.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And failure is, and as an entrepreneur who set up many little businesses, I've definitely learned from the ones that have failed more than I've learned from the ones that have brought me a decent income. That's for sure. So yeah, and here I find myself now working for free, the housing sector. Yeah. So look, okay, that's great. My big fear is. That it's too easy to become a tick box exercise. So for me as a housing provider, go, yeah, we had Marie and our staff are all happy. We've ticked that box. And then 2 weeks later, the handouts have all gone in the bottom of the drawers and nobody's doing it. And we're back to where we were. How do you stop that from happening?
Well, that's a really great point, actually, in terms of these are when I worked in housing, we do like corporate wide training program. So we do something on customer excellence, for example. And yeah, we did exactly what you said. It gets put away. These are the things that we need to keep revisiting.
Mm.
So it's not just there you go, we've done it, tick box exercise. It needs to be like you do in terms of like the repairs, cyclical maintenance, where you're going back and sort of repainting your fascias or every so many years, or you're going and trimming your hedges and all that. This is the sort of thing, especially because you get lots of fantastic new talent to the organisation.
Yeah.
So there's lots of people that need to be kept up to speed with improving the culture. And so I would say maybe every 2 years revisit the training so that
Mm.
you're making sure that you're capturing any new additions to your team. That
Yeah.
would be my tip.
I think it's like we need to treat, work relationships the same as we do personal relationships. You need to put the effort in, isn't there? And every time, now and again, I need to take the wife out for a meal, or she needs to do something, and it's that sort of The other day we had a night just sort of chatting, no television, just talking about what was coming up, what we were doing, just to sort of reconnect. And that's the same with your work colleagues, isn't it? I mean, every office I've worked in, I've always had a work wife. But you need to do that reconnecting, don't you? That, are you okay? What can I do? That I failed you there. I didn't do that as I promised, as I agreed. I'm sorry. We need to sort of keep checks and balances of where we are within these relationships so they can thrive. Otherwise, they just go for granted, don't they? And then we lose track of them. All right, Marie. So look, let's wrap this up because time is fast approaching. Thank you very much indeed for your time. If now you could speak to the CEOs of all the housing associations, give them 3 bits of advice off the top of your head, what would it be to help improve the culture of their business and the offerings that they therefore provide to their residents?
Okay.
Well, I have a cup of tea.
So I would say definitely look at providing emotional intelligence training across the board, especially I would say look at asset management as your certain area that definitely need that gearing up with all the demand for house building. So that is a team that I think we need to sort of start wrapping on in cotton wool. And I really enjoyed your recent podcast, Ben, on asset management. That was fantastic. Was it with Laura Young?
Yeah, Laura Young.
Complex Asset Management.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, she was another side that we don't perhaps know much about. That's part of these sort of podcasts. It's look for residents and other parts of the sector to go, well, I didn't know what they did. I didn't know about that. So yes, asset management was a very insightful one. And when she talked about it, I was a bit like, well, why aren't we doing this already? This seems obvious to me.
Yeah, very true. But so I would say emotional intelligence training for the organisation. I'd also suggest looking at focusing more on your middle management. They're the ones that need the investments in terms of support. How are your organisation actually providing wellbeing training or wellbeing strategies? What is their wellbeing strategy, more importantly? A lot of people have invested on mental health first aiders, but who actually supports mental health first aiders? So there's a whole bigger thing around an organisation's wellbeing strategy. And finally, and this might go against the grain maybe, but think about the fun side. We are people, we aren't robots. We go into work. What is the reward strategies for your staff? Are they fit for purpose in today's day and age? I was reading a recent article where it said that staff conferences are the dinosaur of the day in terms of organisations. They're moving more towards festival days. And I thought, we can all do with having a bit of fun now. I know from your perspective as a resident, you think maybe, well, I don't know what your view is in terms of rewards for staff, but I think if you get a happier workforce and a better culture in a workforce, you're more likely to see the positive impact on residents. And
I do agree with that. I agree with that 100%. And I think, and I often get into trouble for the things I say, which is nothing new there. But I don't think a conference is a reward for a team member. It's a day out of the office, and that's what it's a day out of the office, and I go and meet colleagues. Perhaps a festival somewhere where we say, look, this weekend we're putting on something for you to come. Bring your friends, bring your family with you, bring your wives and your children and your husbands, and let's grow the family. I know that Motown always used to have their annual picnic, and that was a great time for everyone to get together. And I do think that's because that is a reward, that is a treat. Other than that, you're sat on a train with a few colleagues, you're having a lunch, you're sat listening to speakers. That's not a reward, and the reward ceremonies leave a bad taste with your residents because they aren't seeing the benefits. We're living in damp homes, and yet you're out drinking and celebrating and dancing and boasting about how great you're doing. I don't think that works. And I think going out and getting drunk one night, So what? Probably do that most Friday nights. Actually a festival, a day-long event where you can bring your friends and your family and celebrate your achievements. I think that's a much better way. Yeah, festivals. Let's give that a go, shall we? I said it. I agree with it, and
Yeah.
that's that. All right,
So
Marie.
festivals,
Look, sorry.
I was just going to say festivals, well-being strategies, and emotional intelligent teams.
There we go. There we go. If we can get that right, we can start to work on those relationships because we've got to rebuild the trust and the relationships. And the only way to rebuild the trust is through fostering open and emotionally intelligent conversations and truthfulness. So, look, Marie, that's been great. It's lovely to see you. And thank you. We've been connected on LinkedIn now for several years. I'm always interested in what you're doing and the work you're doing. So, thank you very much indeed for coming on here today. And let's catch up again soon.
My pleasure. Thanks, Ben.
You're welcome. Bye bye.
Thank you for listening. Let us know if you'd like to come on and share your insights. This has been a Housing Sector podcast. Please like, subscribe, and check out past episodes.